Kinston, North Carolina. Welcome to our Wesley Bible class. We're studying Joshua, and we're going to go into chapters 3 and 4 today. But I wanted to bring up something from chapter 2. Chapter 2 was kind of interesting. If you missed us last week was interesting. All about intel and prostitutes and things like that. So join us for last week's session. It's still online. But last week was about Rahab, who was listed as a prostitute in Joshua. She was more of a courtesan, an upscale prostitute, not just some off-the-wall prostitute. But it might interest you to know that when Matthew was doing the lineage of Jesus, that Rahab is in there. So, we've all got somebody. So, anyway, but she's in the lineage of Jesus. And this brings up another issue that we're going to see from time to time in the Bible. There are a number of women who are heroines in the Old Testament, and even in the New Testament, there's speculation about it. But some of them are of ill repute, or they've engaged in sexuality for the greater gain of the country. They've used it for subterfuge, and they've used it actually for murder. But you don't see these women being condemned for using their sexuality for the greater good in the Old Testament, which is kind of interesting because, of course, the Bible, condemns adultery and adulterous activities, and especially the sexuality that exists within Canaanite worship. So that while on the one hand the Bible is very strict about human sexuality, on the other hand, there are places in the Bible where you'll find it celebrated. Rahab is an indication of that as well. She used her profession as a way of gaining intel, and shared that intel with the people of Israel. And it was crucial for them to bring an accurate report back, so that the people would have confidence when they invaded the Promised Land. So it's kind of interesting. On the one hand, you have God who is telling them everything is going to be fine. You'll go in, everybody's going to be terrorized. You'll overcome your enemies that may look like they're big and strong, but don't worry about it. I've got you. You can conquer anything. And at the same time, Joshua is sending out spies to confirm what God is saying. So we talk about the faith of Joshua. Trust, the word is from President Reagan, trust but verify. Okay, so now they're going to cross the Jordan. All right, so this is chapter 3. Early in the morning, Joshua rose and set out for Shittim with all the Israelites, and they came to the Jordan. They camped before crossing over. At the end of 3 days, the officers went through the camp and commanded the people, when you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord, your God, being carried by the Levitical priests, then you shall set out from your place. Follow it, so that you may know the way you should go, for you have not passed this way before. Yet there shall be a space between you and it, a distance of about 2,000 cubits. Do not come any nearer to it. Okay, so there's always some discussion about what's a cubit. I remember an old comic talking about Noah, and God tells Noah to build an ark and make it so many cubits. He said, "What's a cubit?" Okay, a cubit is the distance from your fingertip to your elbow. Ta-da! Okay, and depending on the king at the time, the standard might change. Because a royal cubit would be from the king. So, anyway, that's, about 2¼ feet or something like that. For me, of course, I'm not royalty, so what do I know? So anyway, 2,000 cubits. Okay, why step back 2,000 cubits? You know, I used to do some demolition when I was an Army engineer, and you'd want to be back about 2,000 cubits from anything that I set out. So they might have this is interesting because it sounds like they almost expect that the ark is going to be destroyed or explode or something, you know. So when they talk about how many cubits you got to stand back from this thing, as far as they're concerned, the ark is either very dangerous or is in great danger.
Verse is in excess of 3,000 feet.
Yeah.
Over half a mile.
Yeah, that's what mine says, about a half a mile.
About a half a mile, like Shazam. Okay, and understand too, they're engaged in an invasion. The Ark of the Covenant is like the standard that a unit would use in 19th century warfare. You'd have a flag bearer that would go out in front of the troops, but he was right there with the troops, and it was used as a communication device to tell, you know, you don't want to get ahead of the flag and you don't want to be behind the flag. You want to be with the flag. If the flag's going forward, you go forward. If the flag's coming back, you come back. Okay. The Ark of the Covenant is like the standard of a military unit, but it's 1,000 yards up, and the last thing you ever want to do is to lose your standard. That was just a horrible thing. If you were a Roman legion and you lost your eagle, if you were a military unit in Revolutionary Civil War stuff, if you lost your standard, you were disgraced. And you had standard bearers, and they expected the guy to get shot, and that's usually it was the job of a second lieutenant, and so he was called. One of the reasons why you get the name for the juniorest officer in the naval unit is he's an ensign, and the ensign is the standard. He's the one who carries the flag, and he's the most expendable. But you're putting your standard a half mile ahead of you, and that makes it awfully vulnerable. It's kind of interesting just how that works, but I'm not sure exactly why they did this. Then Joshua said to the people, "Sanctify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do wonders among you." To the priest Joshua said, "Take up the Ark of the Covenant and pass it on in front of the people." So they took up the Ark of the Covenant and went in front of the people. The Lord said to Joshua, "This day I will begin to exalt you in the sight of all Israel, so that they may know that I will be with you, as I was with Moses." Now, Joshua is in direct contact with God like Moses was. So how do you know what God said to Joshua? If you were Joshua and you wanted God to say something to you, would God say something like this to you? Joshua would say, "God spoke to me and told me." Okay? Now this is in our Bible. It's we accept this as God's truth and everything, but I'll tell you one thing that I have learned about religions over the years. When someone says, "God told me," I'd send spies out. Some of the worst religions in history came from "God told me." Okay? So just be aware of that. But God told Joshua, okay, that he would be with him as he was with Moses. So, he's passing the rank on. "You are the one who shall command the priests who bear the Ark of the Covenant. When you come to the edge of the waters of the Jordan, you shall stand still in the Jordan." Joshua then said to the Israelites, "Draw near and hear the words of the Lord your God." So he's going to tell them what God said. Joshua said, "By this you shall know that among you is the living God, who without fail will drive out from you the Canaanites, Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, Girgashites, Amorites, and Jebusites. Well, there's a couple of ites in there that didn't actually get kicked out, but you know. The Ark of the Covenant of the Lord of all the earth is going to pass before you into the Jordan. So now select 12 men from the tribe of Israel, one from each tribe. When the soles of the feet of the priests who bear the Ark of the Lord your God of all the earth, come to rest in the waters of the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan flowing from above shall be cut off. They shall stand in a single heap. Okay, so we're looking at something like the crossing of the Red Sea. Of course, the Jordan's much smaller, but the same characteristic of God's presence and power is being conveyed to a generation that did not experience the crossing of the Red Sea. So this is not only something that facilitates their movement, but also is a confirmation that God really is with them. So this is, when Joshua says God said, okay, fine, then the waters part, he's probably right. All right? Okay. When the people set out from their tents to cross over the Jordan, the priests bearing the Ark of the Covenant were in front of the people. Now the Jordan overflows all its banks throughout the time of harvest. So when those who bore the Ark had come to the Jordan, and the feet of the priests bearing the Ark were dipped into the edge of the water, the waters flowing above stood still, rising up in a single heap far off at Aram, the city that is beside Zarethan, while those flowing toward the sea of Arabah, the Dead Sea, were wholly cut off. Then the people crossed over opposite Jericho. While all the Israelites were crossing over on dry ground, the priests who bore the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stood firmly on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan until the entire nation finished crossing the Jordan. All right, this is a miracle, right? Everybody concurs this is a miracle? Okay. What about miracles? Have any of you experienced a miracle?
I think so.
I think so. I think so. I've gone through some things that I thought were miraculous. But there are all kinds of miracles. And one of the things that we like to do is to lump them into one category. Okay? So a miracle is something that happens. Okay, just like that. All of a sudden. Somebody is sick and bang, they're healed. Somebody's dead, bang, they're raised from the dead. Somebody needs to cross over the Jordan, and the Jordan parts. They need to cross over the Red Sea, and the Red Sea parts. Okay, there are some people that God doesn't like, and the earth opens up suddenly and swallows them all up. It just, these things kind of happen. Some things kind of happen, and some things don't. Sometimes there are miracles that happen where, yes, it looks as though you have a situation that looks dire, and all of a sudden it's reversed. Okay? But then you have these things that are like geological miracles. And I'm thinking that sometimes a miracle will take place. It looks like all of a sudden, totally out of context. And in other times, I think that sometimes we walk into miracles. Something was going to happen, and it wasn't so much that it happened right then, it's that it happened at a fortuitous time. So there have been all kinds of explanations about why, for instance, the Red Sea would have parted. It could have been a seismic event, it could have been a tsunami, it could have been any number of things that could have caused a parting. You look at what happened with the plagues of Egypt. They follow in an order that makes perfect sense. If you just follow, an algae bloom, all of a sudden the water turns red, then all the fish die, and the frogs get out, and now you got frogs all over the place, and the frogs can't sustain themselves, so they die, and then you get the flies. And, it just one thing, one thing leads to another. Okay, but what was the miracle about it was that it happened when Moses said it would happen. God told Moses, this is what's going to happen, and it happened in that order. Okay? This parting of the Red Sea could have been an issue like that. One of the things that I like is like when Elijah is calling fire down from heaven. Okay? Well, it sounds like it was a small meteorite that came down and did that damage. I mean, from every description that you see about the altar burning up and the water and everything, it just kind of blew away, and people who were standing around there got killed, and it just looks like a small meteorite came bang down. And God didn't just create that meteorite right then. That meteorite had been in an orbit for aeons, okay? And the orbit coincided with Earth, and it collided, and it came out of the atmosphere, and it hit the... God has a wonderful sense of timing. But he was looking at that meteorite from the time of the Big Bang. So I think what you see a lot of times is that God is planning these miraculous events, zillions of years before they ever take place. And he's just got a great sense of timing. Here's Joshua at the Red Sea with the people and getting ready to cross, and something happens, and they go across on dry land. Shazam!
Perhaps it's a slow transformation of a heart or a soul. We may argue whether or not that's miraculous. Through God's grace, those things come to be, but
That's right.
I mean, the hardest of people sometimes, have a 180-degree turnaround, and maybe that's part of His miraculous works.
Yeah, that's right. That God has been working on us since before we were born. Okay? So, in terms of great events that are going to happen in our lives, God has that sense of timing with us. There are portions in the Psalms where they talk about God was looking at us as we were being formed in the womb, and that already had a plan for us. And on the one hand, you don't want to look in terms of predestination, but at the same time, there's an understanding that God has a plan for each of us that is being worked out throughout the course of our lives. And when you get to my age, you start looking back and saying, "Oh, okay, now I get it." It could have gone this way, and it went the other way, and I didn't have a whole lot to do with it. And there's so much in our lives that we think we control, and there's so much in our lives that we don't. Okay? God decides, when we're conceived, are you going to be a male or female? And, some people have trouble with that, but, God's got that worked out ahead of time. And, even what your name is and all kinds of, there are just so many things in your life that are important in your life that you had no control over. It just happens to you, And I'm looking just at the way, my body functions. I got all kinds of things going on inside of me right now, okay? And if any of them stops, I'm in big trouble. But I can't control it. I can affect it, they tell me. But most of the stuff that's happening in me is happening automatically, without me even thinking about it, and that's a miracle in and of itself. And people are very quick to dismiss the fact that that we are the product of a design. God has put these things to happen automatically within us so that we can focus on the larger things of our lives, what we are doing, what we are saying, how we're thinking, who we choose to be with, all of that. So I'm not thinking about this automatic stuff all the time. I'm thinking about a whole bunch of other things that are more important to God. What choices I make, and we are. I mean, they're just the design that we enjoy is a miracle of God. The fact that you breathe in, you breathe out. Who'd have thought? Didn't need to. So.
And there's so many things in nature that are only God could have created or orchestrated or.
And I don't know why it's so hard to convince people of that.
No.
I mean, right now we're looking at AI and all the things that AI is doing independently, pretty much, we think, from even the people who designed it. And they've seen that AI has some self-preservation characteristics that they didn't program in there, so that when the engineer said you're supposed to shut off, AI finds a way not to shut off. And even times when AI has been known to try and blackmail the person who designed it. I know your search history, that kind of stuff. I mean, it happens, and this stuff is going to get out of control. But
I don't understand much more about AI than I do God. And how it works.
There will come a time, just like with humans that God created, that AI is going to think that it is God too.
Scary.
So watch out. Okay? Because everything that AI is based on is human.
Okay.
So what has it got? Human characteristics. And has that always been benign? No, not usually. Okay, so just be aware. All right. So in chapter 4, I think we can do this. It's a short chapter. When the entire nation had finished crossing over the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, select 12 men from the people, one from each tribe, and command them, take 12 stones from here out of the middle of the Jordan, from the place where the priest's feet stood. Carry them over with you and lay them down in the place where you camp tonight. Then Joshua summoned 12 men who he had appointed from the Israelites, one from each tribe. Joshua said to them, pass on before the ark of the Lord, your God, in the middle of the Jordan, and each of you take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of tribes of Israel, so that this may be a sign among you. When your children ask in time to come, what do those stones mean? Then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off from in front of the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When they crossed over the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off, so these stones shall be to the Israelites a memorial forever. It is important for us to have statues. It is important for us to have memorials. It is important for us to make sure that nobody tears them down. Good, bad, or indifferent, a memorial tells a story of something good or bad that happened. And just because it may talk about something that is bad that happened doesn't mean we don't need to be reminded. Because if you can't learn from history, you're going to need a whole lot more memorials. The Israelites did as Joshua commanded. They took up 12 stones out of the middle of the Jordan according to the number of the tribes of Israel, as the Lord had told Joshua, carried them over with them to the place where they camped, and laid them down there. Joshua set up 12 stones in the middle of the Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priests bearing the Ark of the Covenant had stood, and they are there to this day. And how they know that, I don't know, because they're underwater. The priests who bear the Ark remained standing in the middle of the Jordan until everything was finished that the Lord had commanded Joshua to tell the people, according to all that Moses had commanded Joshua. The people crossed over in haste. I think I would. As soon as all the people had finished crossing over, the ark of the Lord, and the priest crossed over in front of the people. The Reubenites, the Gadites, and the half-tribe of Manasseh crossed over armed before the Israelites. So the people who were settling on the east bank of the Jordan were in the vanguard of the people who crossed over. Why? So they could make sure that they did what they said they were going to do. Okay? On that day the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, and they stood in awe of him as they had stood in awe of Moses all the days of his life. The Lord said to Joshua, command the priests who bear the ark of the covenant to come out of the Jordan. Joshua therefore commanded the priests come up out of the Jordan. When the priests bearing the ark of the covenant of the Lord came up from the middle of the Jordan, and the soles of the priests' feet touched dry ground, the waters of the Jordan returned to their place and overflowed all its banks as before. I guess they had to hurry. Then the people come up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month, and they camped in Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. So the Jericho people are seeing all this. Not a big confidence builder for the people of Jericho. Those 12 stones that they had taken out of the Jordan, Joshua set up in Gilgal, saying to the Israelites, when your children ask the parents in time to come, what do these stones mean? Then you shall let your children know Israel crossed over the Jordan here on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan for you until you crossed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up for us until we crossed over, so that all the people of the earth may know that the hand of the Lord is mighty, and so that you may fear the Lord your God forever. It's one thing for your enemy to know that God helped you in the past, but for God to help you in the present, that's a downer. That's a downer for the people that you're going to attack. Okay? So they were all looking, and they got to be terrified, because they know that something is going on here that is supernatural. And also, what you have here is a verification. One of the things you notice as you go through the New Testament and you study the life of Jesus is that there are things that are ticked off in the New Testament about the life of Jesus that mimic miracles that happened with Moses in the Old Testament. So what you're looking for are things that are passed on, mantles that are passed on. If Elijah did something, Jesus will do that. Elijah spent days in the wilderness and he was fed. Jesus spent days in the wilderness and he was fed. There were, one thing after another. You're going to see an Old Testament model and a verification that the hand of God is with Jesus, because the same thing happens with Jesus that happened with these big dudes in the Old Testament. Okay? So this is a verification, a certification of Joshua's leadership. All right. So, thank you for watching. We have, so far, we're running about 44 people that watch us online, which is really cool. If any of them have anything to say to me about this, I invite you to do so. Okay? And you can contact me, which you haven't yet, at revlev@ncc.umc.org. .org.
Yeah.
And,
Is there a dot between there?
revlev@ncc.umc.org. Okay, thank you. I'm getting older. Okay, but I look forward to hearing from you, and thank you for being with us today. See you next Sunday, and we're going to be talking about Joshua in the 5th chapter, and some interesting notes on that one too. So, God bless. Talk to you later.
Thank you.
Dennis, is this your music?
No.
Mine. Oh, that's